play. And another foul on Ward. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul, offensive foul coming up again. Valentine's Day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to an August 8th edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn with The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart of umhoops.com. Dylan, what is the word, man?
Dark times to cover college basketball in early August. Not a lot going on.
Not a lot. It's rough. It's rough, but we're here for the people, Dylan. It's not about us. It's about them.
I started watching a Nebraska exhibition game over in Europe.
Holy shit.
I didn't know anyone on the court.
I was going to say, well, now you can probably name more people on the actual Nebraska basketball team than about 99.9% of the college basketball public.
There was no announcers. I can just confirm that they were wearing red practice jerseys, and then I quickly turned it off.
Wow.
It's just dark times when you're pulling up Big Ten. You just need a little bit of Big Ten hoops in your life, and it wasn't cutting it.
What kind of stuff's Fred running there?
Fast. Tempo. Tempo. Unfortunately, tempo in August can look like a bad rec game more than
Yeah, think back to Michigan last year in Spain. I'm sitting there watching that team saying, my God, no one can shoot. They don't know what they're doing. I think, 4 months later less than that. 3 months later, they were running Villanova off the floor and looked like a Final Four team. So,
but no one felt bad for you because you were in Spain covering hoops.
Oh, yeah.
You really lost out on another Europe trip this summer.
Michigan State, balking at it, which probably made sense, though. If you go to the Final Four, and then you have the opening slate that they have to their schedule, and I'm not with it including a trip to Maui, I'm not sure a trip to Spain is the best idea, especially when your National Player of the Year point guard is coming off knee tendonitis. Although it would have been a good run for Rocket Watts and those guys, but that's going down another conversation today. So here, there's going to be a little adjustment to the moving screen, folks. So buckle up for this huge announcement. We are going to start divvying up episodes to be more centered on a single school. So we might be releasing 2 pods in one day, one on Michigan, one on Michigan State. But the whole go try to navigate 50% of one episode on Michigan and then 50% of an episode on Michigan State, we're just going to break it up. We're not sure how many people are actually listening all the way through. And this is more of an we could go back doing it the way we did, but this is kind of an experiment. We'll look at the numbers and see how people are responding to it. But do you have anything to add on this momentous day, Dylan?
No, I don't think we have to justify it. It's our podcast. We can do what we want.
Well, fair. I like that. Everyone can go piss off. All right. So today we're going to do some Michigan recruiting, and then we will follow it in the coming days with an episode on Michigan State recruiting. So that's how it's going to go. And if you like it, file all complaints to umhoops at... No, I'm kidding. So we're going to do Michigan recruiting here. We're going to go some big picture stuff and get into the 2020 long list of recruits that Michigan is looking at. We'll touch on 2021, but 2020 will be the main focus. Obviously a huge deal. Juwan Howard is very aware that his name is on this first class. This is kind of a huge proving ground, I think, for not only validating him as a college basketball coach, but validating Ward Manuel's hire. Because if the guy doesn't get recruits, now you're gambling on his coaching, and he's never been a head coach, right? So recruiting's a big part of this thing, and why Juwan Howard was hired in the first place, right, Dylan?
Yeah, I would say Juwan Howard was absolutely hired in part because of his promise as a recruiter. That's no secret. Right. And the argument would be that he has a chance to really elevate the ceiling, I guess, so to speak, of the talent that Michigan brings in. Will that happen? It's also, he's not like a proven recruiter in that regard, right? This is his first go-around recruiting. So it's kind of an interesting situation, and the way the calendar stacks up puts him in an even more, I guess, precarious situation where he's going to have to coach a season and have to sign most of this class potentially before he even coaches really more than 1 or 2 games. So you have a lot of – it's easy to poke holes and say, well, what's Juwan Howard – if you're recruiting for another school, you're going to say, oh, what's Juwan Howard going to do to actually coach team? And it's easy to negative recruit him. Mm-hmm. It'll be really interesting to see how well he can sell and connect with kids, because that's really what recruiting comes down to, whether you – the product on the floor doesn't always necessarily matter. It's about the relationship that you can build with a kid, right? Yeah. There could be so many kids that you could easily say, yeah, you probably should have gone and played for John Beilein because it'd be great for your game or it'd be great for whatever. But if the personality fit isn't there, if you don't do as good of a job, recruiting is basically a separate ability than coaching, if you ask me. So how he coaches shouldn't really have that much impact on how he recruits. And we're going to have a pretty good example of, or I guess our first test of how well Juwan Howard recruits coming up here.
You know, the interesting thing I feel like is if they start missing on guys, what is the reaction here, right? Because we're going to go through names here, but it's a very top-heavy start to their original list, if for lack of a better term, right? You're looking at a list of 2, 4, 6, so like 8 kind of main guys. They're all top 50 guys, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like back in the day, and we're gonna try to avoid constantly drawing parallels to Beilein and the past regime, but it's kind of impossible in some ways, because there are a lot of it is speaking to the fan base of what it was, what it is now, and what you can expect. So, like, I feel like in the past, going, a couple weeks out from football season when the visits started pouring in, and everyone's wondering who's coming to campus, there'd be like maybe 2 top 50 guys in that mix per year, and then a bunch of kind of guys, 3 stars, they're dudes who they've been recruiting for a long time, but like the top 50 high level recruits that have these monster lists with blue bloods listed in them and stuff like that, there'd be maybe a couple tops.
Yeah, the distribution's different in the sense that there might be 1 or 2 top 30 guys who might have kind of risen up to that point. That would be on a John Beilein list, and he really had started to kind of make his money in that probably 40 to 100 range, right?
Right.
And that was the list of guys who would kind of stick out. He would evaluate them and try to pick his spots in that list. And he obviously did a really good job of that, but he would not recruit more than 1 or 2 guys really who were in that top 30. And a lot of times they came from outside of that group and played their way in, whereas Juwan Howard's sort of working in the opposite direction. Most of his offers have been to guys who were basically top 20, 25 kids, a few guys who are just outside of that group. And we don't really know what his next tier of prospects looks like beyond that group right now, right?
Exactly, and that's my big question. This is my question. So it's a big ask for a first year coach, a brand new staff that's now been working together for basically 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever, to go haul in. They're filling 4 spots. First of all, let's start there. They're recruiting right now for 4 spots in the 2020 class. To go into this process with this many guys that are this highly regarded, the idea of plucking or filling multiple of those 4 open spots, it's pretty tough. So if they start missing, I'd be curious to see how Juwan takes that, and what is the reaction, the pivot in recruiting to other guys and stuff like that. Is there a plan? Is there a secondary list, or is it you just start scrambling a little bit, for lack of a better term? But we're still so far removed. But there are going to start being commitments on these football weekends all over the country, right? That games are going to start dropping.
Here's what's tough about just the way recruiting works kind of at this point in the year. So May and July is all about the evaluation period, right? So everyone's watching guys. They're making themselves be seen. Mm-hmm. And then after all that, prospects come home and they sit back and they say, all right, who's really like making me priority? I'm going to cut my list. I'm going to schedule official visits, and I'm going to go through with the process. Guys at the top of the board do that. Guys in the middle of the board do that, and guys further down the board do that. So what the risk you run when you bring in 5 to 10 5-star type prospects for official visits in September is that next tier of 40 to 100 prospects are taking their official visits to Xavier or Providence or wherever else, and they're moving on in the process. Mm-hmm. They might commit, and they're not going to sit around and wait for school like Michigan to swing and miss on some of their top prospects. Right. They're going to go to where they're wanted, right? I mean, that's only natural, and this is the point in the calendar where that kind of starts churning toward commitments and toward decisions. There are other ways to approach, I guess, kind of that situation as far as if you do your business late in the second signing period. You look at a school like Kansas, who basically didn't prioritize Jalen Wilson in the fall. Mm-hmm. He went to Michigan. If you flipped, or I guess that was in the spring the year before, but a year later, they really need a guy like Jalen Wilson. He becomes available. You really just go all in and kind of make a late move. That's one way around it. There's late bloomers, but you're not just going to be able to drop down to the next tier and say, oh, well, let me swoop in here and just pluck this kid, right? Sure. It's just a tough situation at this point. But here's the thing about recruiting. You're going to miss on most of the kids you offer. Mm-hmm. If you get 2, all of a sudden you have a transformational class.
Right.
If Michigan gets 2 of these probably like 8 to 10 kids who they're in the mix for a final group, it's one of the best classes Michigan's recruited in a decade, easily.
No doubt.
So it's a high risk, high reward game in that regard. That's just basically kind of how it works out. But if you it's not about the 5 guys you miss, because you're not going to sign all of these guys. Mm-hmm. You're not Kentucky. You're not Duke. I mean, it's just different. But look in the Big Ten, 2 players on Juwan Howard's kind of top target list would be one of the best classes the conference has seen in a while.
Right. And they do have one firm commitment still right now in Zeb Jackson. He will be visiting in one of the first 2 weekends. I don't know if that's been decided, but I know that they know that he's coming in for one of the first 2 football weekends. I'm sure. Has that been out there? I don't even know.
I don't know. I don't know if it's been set like a date.
Okay.
I've not seen a lot of set visit dates confirmed out there yet.
Well, I'm told that Zeb's definitely coming in on the first or second football weekend. So I think that's going to be big for them all the way around, right? This kid's kind of held his commitment all along. A lot of that, it's the safe play, and at this end, Zeb is very close with Xavier Simpson and his father, so I think there was enough there to kind of hold him in to the mix, but will be important to probably get him up here. I imagine he'll go through a workout while he's here and kind of get a feel for how the new, what the program looks like and feels like nowadays. So that is one spot taken. Of those other 4, personally, I would certainly not use all 4 early. No way. You have to keep at least one for next spring when the transfer portal opens up again. I think this would be I think it'll be a really attractive place for a grad transfer.
There will probably be additional, if you're including Zeb as one of the spots, mm-hmm. there will probably be, I would say, additional room, even if you take 4 in November.
There could be some transfers. There could be
Austin Davis could grad transfer.
A guy like
and there could be any other
Isaiah
transfers.
Livers could go early, something like that, for all you know. So, yeah, fair. But I'm just saying, you never want to be full.
I don't think you have to reach, I would say, to go beyond. But at the same time, I can't think of the last time Michigan actually ended up full on scholarships when everything's settled. When you know what I mean? And the Big Ten rule is that you can oversign by 1 in November.
Right.
and Michigan is kind of routinely. Sometimes I think they've almost gone over that because they don't count red shirts. A little unclear how I don't know how that works because they don't list red shirts on the roster, so I'm not sure about all that. But there could be potentially additional room in that sense, right?
Yeah.
So I think you look at. I don't think you have to reach and try to get a fourth guy in late in the process, right? I agree with that.
So you want to start going through some names here?
Yeah, so basically there's a big list of guys who have announced Michigan in basically what I would call their final group. And I know a lot of people make fun of everyone releasing these lists and whatnot on Twitter and getting their graphic edits and all this. The one thing I would say that does matter is when you get down to around a top 5, because you get 5 official visits to use, and that's basically the schools that you would use your official visits on. That's when it starts to mean something more or less. And there are quite a few guys in this top 25 range who have included Michigan on their final list, despite the fact that Juwan Howard really just started recruiting them in June, right? So he's certainly made headway in that regard, and I would expect several of these guys to be on campus for official visits for these opening 2 football weekends, and that's really where he's going to try to make his mark. It's what he's been talking about, selling the school in a football weekend since really, I think, his first press conference said something about that. So that's what we're looking at here, and I guess we can just kind of go through some of the top names on the board. Do you want to do it by – we can go –
well, let's start with who we know is coming in the first. Let's base it on the visits.
Okay.
And we'll just add in the rankings and things like that as we go. But like I said, Zeb Jackson's obviously coming in. Walker Kessler will be here in one of the first 2 weekends. I'm not sure. Is that set first or second?
I have not seen it. The only official visit I've seen a date set for is Lance Ware. That's been announced by a kid.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know if Kessler's visit is set, but
I'm told he will be here the first 2 weekends. Yeah.
And he is down to Michigan, Duke, North Carolina, Gonzaga, Auburn, and Cal. Notably absent is Georgia, where basically his whole family played. Duke is obviously a factor here.
Right.
He is probably one of my favorite big men in the whole class. He's really fun to watch, really skilled.
Footwork is sick.
They'll run baseline out of bounds plays for him to shoot threes, coming off a screen, which is ridiculous for a 7-footer. So really skilled kid. He was a priority for John Beilein.
Yep.
He's been on an official visit already to Michigan. That was a junior year official. Anything you want to add on him?
Yeah, I mean, the video that you have up on the site is terrific, and the way that he can finish with both hands going off of either foot and moving, right? He's not a guy he's not just relying on turning and dunking. He's got a really, really great feel for the game, and I wonder what Juwan Howard coming to Michigan does for this recruitment, because he's got the big man development thing. He was in the league for 1,000,000 years, blah, 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 what everyone knows. But, I do wonder with him being previously interested in Michigan and now it being Juwan Howard's Michigan, just where they are. I always kind of felt like Kessler it wasn't going to happen. I just pictured him. He's a kid from Georgia. I'm like, he's going to end up at Duke or Carolina or one of those kind of places. But with Juwan Howard here, and him making the visit that he is, I gotta think they have a real shot.
Yeah, so I think Michigan felt pretty good about his chances before under the old regime, and I think that Kessler's spoken positively about Juwan and about the fact that he's developed big guys. I would say watch out for Auburn here also as the local school.
Well, now that they can recruit.
Now that they weren't recruiting for 6 months, but they're back in the game.
Don't bet against Bruce Pearl ever.
Someone's got to teach Bruce Pearl about pictures and social media and the fact that there's actually evidence that something's happened when
You'd think that he, of all people, guy had a covert recording and was later pictured himself. Man,
You would think.
Bruce. All right, sorry. Moving on.
So Kessler, I would say, is one of the most realistic targets on the board. I also would not say Michigan's a favorite, right? Mm-hmm. That's sort of the common theme, I would say, with this group, where Michigan has worked its way into a contender situation, but I don't know if there's anyone what I would say, if I had to put money down on one school right now, it would be Michigan. You agree with that?
I would always take Duke.
Well, yeah. I mean, in this situation, yeah, that's fine. Okay. So what do we want to hit next? Lance Ware?
We know Lance Ware is coming for sure. He's combo forward, 6'7", from Camden. He's got the East Coast buckets, and Michigan now is an East Coast coach.
So combo forward, I would say the combo is 4-5, not 3-4. If I was describing him, he's really an old school big dude. Plays all around the rim, plays hard as hell, gets a lot of garbage buckets, dump offs. But he was really active. I guess he came to Michigan multiple times under Beeline. I never saw him as a great fit under Beeline, and Michigan never offered. But now he has a Michigan offer. A couple weeks later, he also picked up a Kentucky offer, which is potentially a game changer in his recruitment. But he has not scheduled his Kentucky official visit yet. I don't know if that's just because they were the most recent school to offer, or they're trying to slow play him a little bit. Tough to get a read there, but he's a guy that I would have said Michigan had a really good chance at before that Kentucky offer. But he is set to come on an official September 5th, which is the Air Force game, I believe, right?
Well, that I have no idea about, but I know that there's a football game in Ann Arbor that weekend. But this is, I think he really fits one of the spots that they're looking for right now. I think they're among their main priorities is like a big time scoring wing, a true big, and I think kind of that hard working, son of a bitch type 4-man, maybe a little bit undersized, but a guy that is just going to brawl down there. And he kind of fits that. You look at his body, he's already pretty healthy looking, but you put him in a weight system, he looks like a guy who could really jump and bang and kind of because he's not an above the rim dude. No,
he's not. He's a grinder. I mean, he can dunk and he can finish around the rim.
Right. But he's not a high flyer. He's not,
He's a garbage man 4.
Yeah.
And it seems pretty clear that Juwan Howard was around for a few weeks and decided that I'm going to go out and get a garbage man 4, which there's no one you would describe on Michigan's roster right now that is that type of player.
Right.
And Howard went off, and several of his new offers were to players kind of in that mold. So I would say they definitely want a scoring guard or wing. They want a garbage man 4, and they want a big guy. Those are kind of the 3 buckets to put next to Zeb Jackson.
Right.
And Ware is probably their best shot right now at that garbage man 4.
All right, so who else? Anyone else out there that is? Are we missing anyone that is confirmed for the first weekends?
Not confirmed, but in progress, I would say.
Yeah, the ink is not dry on some of these, but they are expecting of this group of 8 that we mentioned. They are definitely expecting more guys to be here in these weekends. Do you want to start with Burnett?
Yeah, I would say Namari Burnett. He's cut his list to 12 like a week ago, and then he's going to cut his list to 5 next week. I don't know what the point of that process is, but sorry to the 7 schools that got kicked off his list after a little bit of glimmer of hope. I would expect him to take an official visit to Michigan. I also would not – there's a lot of reasons for Michigan to like kind of where it stands. He's known Juwan Howard since he was like in 7th grade. He's been to his camps, Chicago guy. His trainer trains Juwan Howard's kids. There's all these connections. But I also would say to just kind of take those with a grain of salt to the extent that like other things come down to mattering in recruitments. And he's a kid who's from Chicago. plays high school basketball in California, and his first scheduled official visit is to Alabama. Seems like he's kind of open to whatever. So I wouldn't just kind of assume that Michigan's going to waltz in here and get him, but I do think they'll get an official visit, and I think he's a far more realistic target under Juwan Howard than he was under Beeline, who did offer him eventually.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, like they were recruiting him, and part of I think Luke was actually the main recruiter in that originally. Is that right?
Yeah, there was some kind of connection.
He had a connection
because he's a
to him.
Chicago guy.
Yeah.
And he visited for the Michigan State game last year.
Yep.
Did not get an offer, did not go on the academic tour because he got sick on his visit. Then Michigan did offer him a few months later. I don't think they're ever a realistic school to get him under Beeline. I do think they're a realistic option now.
And he's a Chicago kid who's now at a prep school in California, and I'm sure that would raise eyes for anyone who has followed Michigan. But I'm pretty sure he is like really strong academically. Yeah,
I think it was more of like Jordan Poole going to prep school thing, right? Where it's not that he's like a bad student trying to get away from that. It's just for better showcase development situation.
That's my understanding of it. Yeah, there's definitely the two groups. There's guys that want to go play better competition and do whatever and get into kind of one of those more pro-style training setups, and then there's guys who are looking to basically game their transcripts and stuff like that. This is definitely not the latter. I think under Beeline, they were high on him being good to go, that if they could actually get him, he could. Yeah,
if Michigan offered him under Beeline, there's a very good chance that his grades and whatnot are fine. Yeah. Michigan didn't hand out offers without transcripts, etc. So Alabama, he has an official visit scheduled. Illinois, I would expect to make his final five. I would also expect Michigan, and I think the word is that he's going to visit one of those first two football weekends as well.
Yes.
And he's a really good. He's not maybe the most the flashiest guard out there, but he's super productive, big, strong. He'll even post up other guards. Really fun to watch, and he's kind of that sweet spot of where he's not going to go and take 1,000 shots and think he's the man right away, but he'll just get you buckets. I like his game a lot. He's just an intriguing fit and kind of a unique prospect compared to the standard 5-star guard, I would say.
Interesting.
Super long wingspan.
All right, who you want to touch on next?
We can get into Hunter Dickinson. He's another guy that I would think would take an official at some point this fall. It's been talked about, but I don't think scheduled. Legit 7'2" guy. Michigan's in his final 7, but I don't know if I would really call them the favorite again. But they've been making up ground after offering.
Did you rattle off his top 7?
No, it's Michigan, North Carolina, Florida State, Providence, Purdue, Notre Dame, and Louisville. I would look at Notre Dame and Purdue quite a bit here as kind of the early contenders. Purdue obviously does a great job with big 7-footers and has hours of game film that they can show for how they'll use a guy like that. And Notre Dame basically recruits DeMatha as well as any school in the country. So that's a big connection there.
Good point. And not only a true 7-footer, but I mean he's a true big. He's not the skinny 7-footer Colin Castleton type. He's a load. He looks way more like an Austin Davis, just in terms of shoulders and hips, and he's just kind of a big guy. He certainly moves better. He's a
Austin
better
Davis
athlete.
with another half foot. He's huge. I mean, this dude's just a monster, like an old school, just physical presence inside. What's interesting?
Get up and down the floor fairly well, man, for his size.
Yeah, there's a reason he's a top 30 kid. He can play. What's interesting about Dickinson is where does the big man board go after Kessler and Dickinson?
Right.
because there's not really an obvious next step, and that is really probably the one position where you'd say Michigan has to find another big guy to add to the roster, and that's, I guess, where I would say the board is probably thinnest at this point.
Do you think that means that they've just haven't had time to? I mean, that's the thing. They've only been recruiting for what, 2 months? Like it is hard to have a comprehensive, 30, 40 man deep list of guys and blah 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 and all that stuff. And obviously they inherited some of whatever the 2020 group that the previous regime was under. Sadie Washington is a holdover and is at least able to bridge the gap with any guys that they did make contact with that we might not even know about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that'll be interesting kind of as the fall progresses if they start to try to bring in some other big guys for official visits, because I would say Kessler and Dickinson will be on campus, but where do you go after that? And that next tier will emerge.
Well, and there's two things. Dickinson did have that quote, I think, where he said that he even liked Michigan more when it went from Beeline to Howard, and you can play them off of each other.
You can try.
When you sit down with one, you can say, look, we have offers to two of you. If you want to come, if this is the spot, now's the time. Yeah, so,
that's a move. It doesn't always work.
It doesn't always work, but that's going to be the play, I feel like.
Yeah, that's a bold move. You got to have you got to be on the edge of landing one to try to pull that card, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it'll just be like, sorry, this isn't for me. But that's also a good, you need to know answers, and that's the thing about this. Is you're going to invest resources, you're going to invest some of your official visits are limited. I don't know the number, but so if you bring in all these guys who aren't legitimately interested for official visits, you could run the risk of running out of official visits when you need them down the road, right? Mm-hmm. So that's something to consider when all this stuff gets scheduled. It's really it's a sign from both the school and the prospect that they're legitimately think there's a chance that this can happen. You don't want to bring guys in for official visits if you think you have an 8% chance at landing them, right?
Yeah.
So we can get into maybe some of the guards. Jaden Springer is one guy I think you said you want to talk about.
Yeah, kind of an interesting guy. He originally listed his list of 11 schools at one point, and Michigan was not on it. And then suddenly Juwan Howard and more specifically Phil Martelli come in, and then Michigan pops up on his Final Five list. The connection here that people probably already know about is Springer is the cousin of DeAndre Bembry, who is a kid who spent 3 years at St. Joe's playing for Martelli and is now in the NBA with the Atlanta Hawks, right?
At one point he was. I believe that's right.
I think that's still right. But Bembry was kind of he was a good recruit for St. Joe's, but he was probably a little bit higher than the normal guy that they got under Martelli, and then had just a terrific 3 years at St. Joe's. He was the guy who, as a freshman, everyone kind of looked out watching games and said, that's going to be a guy. That's an all-Atlantic 10 player right there, and then ended up being able to go early to the league, got drafted. So he and Phil are obviously still tight. This is his cousin, and I don't think Springer and Bembry are best friend brother cousins, right? But they are close enough that Martelli going to Michigan and all of that was able to kind of pique their interest enough, and now Michigan's heavily involved with him. I think he will probably be on campus in the first 2 weeks as well.
Yeah, and he's a guy who is originally, I think, from North Carolina. Is that right?
Charlotte. That's where
then he goes to IMG.
Mm-hmm.
I think that both Memphis and Tennessee are heavily involved in his recruitment. Really, I would call him more of a combo than a wing, right? He's just kind of an explosive
I like
scorer.
his game a lot.
And there's a lot of ways, what Michigan is looking for in this class is like a playmaker scorer. I don't think it matters if you're 6 foot, if you're 6'7", but they're just really prioritizing someone at that position to really just come in and get a bucket. Mm-hmm. And he would certainly fill that role. That would fill that role. Christopher would fill that role. So he's right in that mix. I don't think you could really go wrong with any of them. But
no,
he's a kid who, I mean, you get an official visit, you have a chance in that regard, right? But you're going against North Carolina, you're going against Memphis, some of the best recruiting schools in the country, Tennessee.
But I just, his all around game, because he's a I think he's listed like 6'4", but he's one of these guys who can go. He uses his body, like he's strong. He's just not looking to always just beat guys off the bounce. Like he'll run through you a little bit. Good strong body. Really controls himself around the basket. Has a lot of little kind of nifty moves and stuff like that. There's just good clay. I think he'd be terrific.
Yep. Again, same situation where Michigan's given itself a chance. Probably not a favorite,
right.
Considering that they just came out of the blue, but obviously in enough contention to add them, right? That's the thing about this. It's hard to balance like the momentum as far as, yeah, I like them enough to add them to my list for, I don't have to do that, but can you get over the hump to, yeah, I want to go there.
And the big thing, I do feel like the big thing is getting one early and get the momentum, right? You need, if you get one of these badasses, and now the other guys who are in the top 50 say, oh damn, Springer's going there. Well, I want to go play with him, and that's how it happens. If you're still sitting there, weeks into it when people are picking up commitments and some of these top 15 guys are off the board, it gets harder and harder and harder. So if they grabbed, Springer's the 11th ranked player in the country. You get a guy like that, a guard too. It makes it a lot easier to suddenly you become a lot more attractive.
Yeah, it creates a little momentum, a little of that. We only have this many spots sort of quality to it, and gets the dominoes falling, so to speak. We can hit on Josh Christopher.
Let's talk Josh Christopher.
This dude has some of the most ridiculous highlights I think I've ever seen.
Right.
And he is a showman in every sense of the word. Just like if you go look up some of his videos at the AAU tournament in Vegas, just ridiculous. Dunking on people,
staring
crossovers, the whole package. I mean, he is just an entertainer, and also super talented. He seems to genuinely like Juwan Howard. I think he said they talk about shoes, and I think shoes are pretty big to him. He wears like a different pair of shoes every game he plays. He had some custom Stranger Things shoes that he was playing with in the Peach Jam. He's got the whole package there. The problem for Michigan here is that he's called Kentucky his dream school for the last 6 months, and now Kentucky just offered.
Right.
That's tricky. Arizona State offered his brother a scholarship, and no one else offered his brother a scholarship. It's a bold play. Missouri, his cousin or uncle, I believe, is the strength coach at Missouri. So those.
Oh, Josh, is that right?
Yeah.
I know that guy.
Yeah, so that's he's related to him. And
they have the same last name. He was at Tennessee when I was there.
So that explains why Arizona State and Missouri are on his list. UCLA, obviously, he's a California kid. He's close with Shaq's son, I believe, as well, who's at UCLA. So that's a tough list. But he's also maybe the kind of kid who you could sell. You can be the Jalen Rose of my first recruiting class, right? I mean, he is that kind of guy. The downside is he teamed up with this Jalen Green kid who's another 5-star when he was in Vegas, and Kentucky's really trying to pitch them to come to Kentucky and play together.
Right. And that's a hard thing to say no to.
Yeah. Kentucky also just keeps landing recruits. Like, I don't know how many they can sign that are all 6'6" and score, but I think Cal can prove that he can land 5 or 6 of those guys and figure it out later.
Yes.
So that's a tough spot. But
there is a chance that of the 8 names that we say, Michigan loses like 4 of them to Kentucky. That could happen.
Yeah.
Because the Isaiah Todd kid might go to Kentucky too, right?
Yeah, I would think they would be in the mix. So you have Kentucky, your Duke, or North Carolina is in like every one of these recruitments.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if you're looking for good news, you could say they can't take everyone, right?
Right.
Maybe there's a limit of how many guys want to all go play together. But if Michigan gets an official visit from Christopher, maybe they have a chance, right? And they're in the top 5, so it seems like that could happen.
I do wonder if there is a like legitimate level of attraction to being the first guy that commits to Howard and Michigan, like being the first dude in this. Like I'm
sure
if that,
that's part of the pitch.
I would think so, but like I just wonder how much a kid would really care.
Because if you remember, Juwan Howard was the first commitment of the Fab Five.
Good point.
And recruited the rest of them, right? So I'm sure that's part of kind of the way he sells the plan to them, but we'll see. Christopher, if he came to Michigan, just would be an absolute show. Just a scene. I don't even just look up his videos.
Yeah, it is quite the film. I'd be absolutely fall out of my seat stunned if it happened. No?
I agree. He's going to Kentucky. He's just a Kentucky guy.
Yeah. Isaiah Todd, you want to touch on him? Kid out of Raleigh.
Yeah, another kid who Michigan's just randomly kind of showed up. He didn't tell anyone when they offered him, and then he's like, "Yeah, I think I'm going to put him in my top 5." I don't see this as realistic as even some of the other ones.
He's out of Word of God, the school in Raleigh, the same school that produced John Wall. John Wall played for Cal. Kentucky is also leading the recruitment for this kid. And North Carolina is, I think, right behind them, and the kid lives in Raleigh. I'd be pretty shocked if they were able to pull him away from either one of those two. No?
And the other 2 schools on his list are Kansas and Memphis.
Uh-oh.
I mean,
red flags.
That's just the way to put a list together. The guy he's kind of he would be in that power forward mold. The guy I would think is kind of more realistic there that we should talk about is Jamin Brakefield, who Michigan just recently offered. He is a 6'8" kind of combo forward from Milwaukee. Goes to Huntington Prep. I think he's friends with Iggy Brastakis. He's friends with Zeb Jackson. Zeb Jackson's really been trying to recruit him a bit. He's a top 40 kid who has said that he wants to take an official visit to Michigan now that they offered. So he would definitely be one to keep an eye on. And he is a guy who I kind of like. I wouldn't call him a garbage man for, but he's athletic and also a bit more skilled. I mean, he'd be a really good ad in that spot. And maybe he's a little more realistic where he doesn't have the blue blood offers as much, but he's still like a top 40 kid. So that's an interesting one to keep an eye on coming up here.
Yeah, really long, good tape. I mean, certainly one and done type guy. A lot of these guys are, obviously, when you're talking about the top 50 dudes in the country. But he's also, what his crystal ball is for?
Kentucky, but I don't think they've offered him. So that's the thing, right? Like,
yeah,
I think he's more likely to end up more of a Big Ten type recruit. Like I could see, I think Michigan State's involved.
Michigan State offered, I believe.
Yeah, and obviously Miles Bridges went to Huntington Prep, so connections there. I could see. I mean, there's just there's the blue blood level of recruit, and then there's kind of the Big Ten level of recruit, right? He's that next tier where you'll see schools like Ohio State, Michigan State involved.
Right. And I mean, as a fun game for the listeners out there, sit down and start rattling off the number of McDonald's All-Americans to have come through the Big Ten in the last 10 years.
And, just look at the kids we've gone through so far. That Michigan is in the Final Five. How many other Big Ten schools are on any of those lists.
Right.
Amari Burnett with Illinois, I think that's the only one. Dickinson and Ware, right? Again, when you get to 25 to 50, that's kind of the Big Ten sweet spot.
Yeah, I mean, if they actually start pulling these guys, it would be a monumental shift.
It would certainly draw some attention, I would say. The problem with this is probably neither here nor there, but when you start getting guys at this level, you got to get them in the next class too. Mm-hmm. So, but you create a bit of momentum.
Right, but it becomes a lot easier too.
Yeah. Who else do we not hit on? I guess we can talk Henry Coleman briefly. Mm-hmm. This is another kid that Michigan offered after Peach Jam week. He was in the Adidas tournament, but after that, the one grassroots July weekend, Coleman is basically the epitome of a garbage man 4, a bit undersized, plays hard, dunks on people. He's ranked 39th in the country, I think. Duke has his first official visit, and Duke is the far and away favorite here. So I would kind of expect him to end up there. If he doesn't commit to Duke on his official visit, which I think is in late August, I want to say, then maybe that becomes a more realistic target for Michigan.
Yeah, that sounds right. And I mean, this is the thing, and I hate to keep like hammering on it, but just how realistic is it to actually beat some of these schools for some of these guys that have been getting them for years? The guy up the road, Tom Izzo, has been beating his head against the wall for years while going to 8 Final Fours, mind you, and still loses, guys that he spends 6 years recruiting
and
to Kentucky and Duke.
He probably had a good shot at some of those guys, right?
Yeah, and they did. They, in theory, did they? I don't know. But, for Juwan Howard to just walk in the door and actually start to pull some of these guys, we'll see. So of the 8 names that we said, actually I think 9 because you added the kid they offered yesterday, Brakefield. So say 9 guys. I put the over-under at 1.5. What are you taking?
I'd go under probably.
Okay.
I think if you get one though, you're in a good spot. Mm-hmm. I would say that's probably an accurate over-under, right? I mean, if you get 2 of these guys, it's a great class. If you get 1, it probably depends on how you fill out the rest of the class later or down the line. Mm-hmm. But it's still going to be a good group. I mean, guys like at this level just don't come through the Big Ten that often, if you really sit down and think about it.
Right.
So that's what you have to keep in mind. And if you can get 2 of these dudes, you're going to have a good team. And, I mean, Michigan has playing time to sell. They have, they're going to say the guy who has the ball in his hands all this year, he's going to be gone. So
yeah,
come and do you. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I'm really curious to see how. So you look at the 2 football weekends. Say Michigan has 5 of these kids on campus over those 2 weekends. Mm-hmm. What do they do next? Say you don't get a commitment on the visit, on any of those 2 visit weekends. Who do they schedule more visits with? Do they hand out more offers? Where does that all go? I'm really fascinated to see how that kind of plays out. Or maybe they just land 3 of them and rocking and rolling, and it's on their way. You don't know. But what happens those second 2 weeks of September will be really fascinating, I think.
It will be. I think that's the $1 million question, because that is the most logical thing that actually plays out. Is that they're going to have to adjust, adapt, and come up with a plan. And again, for all we know, there could be a whole crop of guys that they are staying in contact with via text and blah 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 blah, but they just haven't set up busy, right? Like,
it's more the idea of
it's just they have no idea who exists beyond these guys. Is certainly not the case.
No, but you have to decide. You have to make an educated guess and gamble on. I think I have this strong of a shot to land this prospect who I just hosted for an official visit, or I'm going to schedule an official visit with my next tier of guy who might alienate the 5-star who I just had on campus, right?
Sure.
And like you obviously want to be patient with some of those, but like John Beeline was notoriously impatient when it came to these official visits around here, and like a guy would move his visit and he would just cancel it and offer someone else, right? I don't know how those decisions play out can be really crucial, right? Like you look at Cassius Winston, Xavier Simpson, right? Like Michigan might have ended up with a much worse point guard if it had waited out the Cassius Winston situation and didn't go after Simpson, right? Those are like the hardest decisions in recruiting, but they're really the ones that make or break you because you're kind of up against it and you have to actually create a team. Whereas like taking Tyus Battle's commitment was the opposite, right? Like that messed them all up. So it's just those decisions are the
Tyus Battle. Oh man, what a scene that was. But okay.
One interesting fact: we've gone through all these names, offers, top fives. What have we not talked about at all?
2021.
Well, in-state kids.
In-state kids, right?
And that also kind of tacks on to 2021, where not a lot of emphasis on recruiting the state, which obviously Michigan is not the most talented basketball state out there, but Juwan Howard's approach is clearly to be, I would say, a national recruiter. Yes. You got California, Georgia,
wherever the
Chicago,
wherever the dudes are, is where Michigan is recruiting right now.
Yeah, that's notable.
Yeah. And if there were a lot of dudes in the state beyond that weren't named Amani Bates and other, like who here are you like? I can't believe that they're not on this guy yet.
So they're not on Isaiah Jackson. Very hard. That's a complicated one.
That's a complicated one. Is right. I don't even know if it's worth wasting time.
And so that's probably a smart decision in some regard. Carlos Johnson Scooby is a guy they offered before, still kind of has an offer, has not been real vocal about his recruitment. I don't know if it's one they're really pushing for at this point. He's also just kind of a lower tier of prospect than some of these guys they've offered. What I think is going to be interesting to watch is the 2021 class in-state. Michigan State handed out 3 offers to in-state kids yesterday. Kobe Boofkin, Jaden Akins, and Pierre Brooks Jr. Michigan hasn't offered any of those kids yet. Michigan has extended like 10 2021 offers. It'll be interesting to see kind of if Juwan Howard goes after those guys, prioritizes them. Jaden Akins was just at Michigan's camp over the weekend, played really well.
Right.
So that'll be probably our test of how much Juwan Howard wants to prioritize in-state recruiting with guys who are not, to be fair, they're all good prospects. Sure. They're not the level of the guys Michigan's offered in that class right now.
Sure. And there's a lot of this is there's only so much that can be done in so much time. And when it comes to, something like in-state guys in 2021, I think there's probably over there they are. I know they're in touch with 2021 guys, of course, but I think they're in terms of like real focus. It's been tunnel vision on those 4 spots for 2020,
which is completely fair considering the circumstances. And Michigan State's probably watched every game some of those in-state kids have played for the last 2 years, right?
Izzo's known it's just all a different guys situation. They were in 6th grade, and they've probably been on campus a million times. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, and in some regards, it's probably easier to make up ground with a national recruiting target than an in-state kid. In-state kids expect to be offered at certain times. They're going to compare to when Michigan State started recruiting them. Whereas with a kid from Charlotte, the reason Michigan never recruited him is because, well, they never heard of him and he was over there, and it just makes more sense, right? If North Carolina was offering a kid from Charlotte at this point, they'd be like, well, maybe not, right? So that's just kind of the interesting calculus in that regard, I would say.
All right. Anything else you want to touch on?
Are you going over or under 1.5?
See, the thing is, I don't think it's impossible for them to get one of these guards, wings, like a Springer or someone like that. And I feel like if you get one, you get two. You know what I mean? I almost feel like it's 0 or 2 in a lot of ways, if that makes sense.
That does speak to kind of the high risk, high reward nature of the situation.
Right. Like, I don't know if there's an in-between. I don't know if you just do one. So,
yeah.
If I had a bet between 0 and 2, I'd bet 2.
Okay. There you have it.
So there you go. That's me, Mr. Positivity.
That's why you're here.
Okay. Well, that was good. Anything else?
No, so we're going to be back and do this with Michigan State at some point.
Yeah.
And, yeah, this is a little test of the new format, so let us know what you guys think. And if you like it split up, if you like it all in one pod, hopefully this way we don't have to, like, build up multiple things to talk about. And when there's one thing that happens with one score or the other, we can just dive into it, and it'll be a little cleaner, so to speak.
Right. When there's a newsy item, we can just jump in and do 20 minutes if we want, things like that. So that's it.
That's it.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Be sure to rate the pod if you can. Leave a review. Share it with your friends. And subscribe to umhoops.com. The videos that Dylan puts together on all these guys that we listed are really, really good. They're really clean, and they're all about 4 minutes, right, or so.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of get a good feel for all the names that we've just rattled off. So subscribe to Hoops. Check out those recruiting profiles that Dylan puts together, and subscribe to The Athletic, which is now for all you soccer fans out there like Mr. Burkhart.
I can vouch. Some good EPL content. It's better than the golf.
Oh,
just kidding, man.
Deep burn. As I get ready to pack a bag for 2 weeks on the road for golf coverage, not playing. All right. So subscribe to The Athletic, subscribe to Hoops, and be sure to tip your bartenders and your servers. Thanks, everyone.